Expand your mind and enrich your world. It's time for another outstanding podcast from ICRT. This is Taiwan Talk.
This is Taiwan Talk on ICRT.
It's Thursday, March 27th. Hello and welcome to this special podcast edition of Taiwan Talk. I'm Keith Manconi. With the occupation of the Legislative Yuan now in its 10th day, the leaders of the student protest movement remain skeptical about meeting with President Ma Ying-jeou to discuss the controversial trade and services agreement with China. Although initial reports claim the student movement was willing to meet with Ma, protest leaders late yesterday said they are currently not ready to accept such a meeting. The presidential office says Ma remains open to discussing the accord with student representatives and that the process could be broadcast live. In addition, presidential office spokeswoman Garfi Lee says Ma is willing to provide clear explanations to doubts surrounding the agreement. However, protest leader Lin Fei-Fan says the failure so far of cross-party talks to produce any agreement show that KMT leadership is still instructing party members to block any resolution to the disagreement. I spoke with Lin at the Legislative Yuan about the stalled talks and what he hopes to achieve through them. Protesters Jenny Chen and Shannon Chen assisted us with translation. So protest leaders have decided to put off talks with President Ma Ying-jeou because they say that the inter-party dialogue has not been very productive, and they see that as a negative sign. They see that as a sign that the KMT is trying to control its members, and probably talks with President Ma won't be very positive. So at this point, what is the next step to move this process forward? What is your plan to move this towards a resolution?
So we
are now still trying to put negotiations forward, but because from what we saw yesterday, President Ma is not showing his sincerity. Because yesterday we saw that the negotiations between the two parties broken. So we don't think he's sincere enough. So I don't think without his sincerity, these negotiations will have any meaning.
How do you move forward at this point?
Well, what we think is that as long as President Ma show his sincerity, show that he is not going to force his legislator to obstruct the proceedings of this movement, then we are very willing to talk to him.
So at this point, what would President Ma, what's a concrete action that he could take to show you his sincerity? What would you need to see to be willing to meet with him?
What
the committee is asking for is that President Ma openly speak about this issue and to have an open dialogue, not just the invitation to a few representatives of this and to talk about this issue. It has to be a open and public conversation, not just between few representatives, including him or Mr. Chen or a few others. It has to be a very open public conversation.
至少是要针对我们所关心的这两个问题。
We need to respond directly to two questions we proposed. One is the legalization of a watch mechanism on this trade agreement. And second, they have to promise to first legalize this mechanism and then talk about the trade pact.
So if you don't see any positive actions taken on the part of the presidential administration, and this keeps going on and on and on, what kind of actions are you prepared to take?
我觉得他现阶段我们判断他不会没有任何的回应。
Judging from the current situation, we are pretty optimistic that he won't postpone and refuse to respond, because the more we stay here, the more bargaining power we have. So we believe that he will eventually respond.
As this protest continues, do you have any concern about any kind of negative effects that you're causing both to the function of government and to the lives of many people that are involved in the protests that are putting most of their life on hold? Do you have any concerns about that?
就是抗争的成本一定会有，抗争的代价也势必会很高。
There will be cost behind any protest. This is for sure. And I know that because of this movement, many people are worried that our country is not functioning well and the participants cannot continue with their normal life, go to class or work. And we are hoping to reduce such cost. But however, I think the main point is that it is the government's responsibility to do this, not us.
So you've said that you believe that Taiwan is in a constitutional crisis. Can you explain to us what you mean by that? What is the constitutional crisis, and what's the root cause of that problem?
其实这个整个事情的发生，其实告诉我们两件事情。一个是说台湾的代议政治。
I think what we can see from this whole series of things is there are two things we can see from this latest movement. First is that the legislators are no longer able to represent the people's voice. And second, originally, the country is based on three different powers. One is administrative power, one is legislative power, and the other is judicial power. But what we can see now is that administrative power is beyond everything, and that is wrong.
And there should be a more balance in the checking and balance. And currently the system is missing that very important part of three branches of the government.
So the demand from the protesters is that a monitoring law is passed so that future cross-strait agreements are monitored. How do you think that this will address the problem that you're talking about, the constitutional crisis that you're describing?
监督机制这部分，因为我觉得实际上是说。
The students and the protesters are asking that after passing this law, they will reinforce the check and balance system. That because right now, without the monitoring law, that they're putting lots of power on the majority party. That anything that the government decides to do, they will be able to pass in the legislature because of the majority party. So it is very important that to establish a law that it's legalized to bring more power to the people.
Can you give us some details about how this monitoring law would work? Who would be responsible for the monitoring?
这个监督机制基本上是。
There are mainly two parts that we demand in the monitoring mechanism. First of all, is before the agreements are signed, there should be a set process on how the two sides negotiate. And then after the agreements are signed, there should also be mechanism to watch how things are moving forward.
After the law established, the legislators will have to follow certain laws because that's the government law. So legislators will have to follow the procedures that will be proposed by this law.
There are problems in many democracies around the world, and there's problems with the representation that democracies give to their constituencies around the world, and we probably could have criticized Taiwan a month ago, a year ago. Why is this the issue that protesters felt like they needed to take such actions over?
实际上，我参与过的运动非常的多。我们从2008年的时候
Actually, I have been trying to push this forward for a long time. Since 2008, when representative from China came to Taiwan, I already proposed a better mechanism in cross-strait relationships. But back then, what we did is a peaceful sit-in. And we did propose that there should be a better way to monitor cross-strait relationships, and the media should improve its functionality. But none of these voices were heard, so that is why it took to this point.
Why is it that cross-strait agreements are a kind of legislation that you think deserves special scrutiny above and beyond what other legislation receives?
其实两岸的协议的，因为台湾目前
Well, currently, the constitution of Taiwan is still seeing Taiwan as a part of China. So that is why there is no monitoring system between the two parties when we sign any agreements. And I cannot agree with this. I think that any agreements between Taiwan and China should be taken as international agreements rather than national agreements.
That's why there should be an agreement signed between, only specifically about any agreement in the future that's signed between Taiwan and China. Because any other agreement signed between other countries, our constitution has stated specifically on how to protect Taiwanese rights. but because of the special relationship between Taiwan and China, now that's why they're proposing that the constitution has a fault in it.
Is there a form, let's say that the cross-strait service trade agreement came back and was changed, is there a form of this agreement that you could support?
这个协议的内容本身的问题非常大，就是说两岸在开放的这个项目里面。
So, judging from the content of this agreement, it is not an equal agreement because we opened a lot of important business in the service industry to the mainland. For example, the publishing industry and the advertisement industry. But these have its political risk. Once they are open, there are political risks. For example, just take Hong Kong as an example. Now, the government can use advertisement to affect people's freedom of speech. They can use the advertisement to obstruct the freedom of speech. So I think that anything related to the safety of our country should not be open so abruptly. And there are 7 million laborers. There will be 7 million laborers impact in Taiwan once these businesses are open. So there should be complementary policies provided, but we didn't see any from the government.
我觉得这是一个台湾的历史时刻啊，就是说
I think this is a historical moment in Taiwan's democratic history, so we need more support from all around the world. If we fail in this movement, the cost will be severe. So I think that it is our responsibility to better the democratic system in Taiwan, and we are asking for more support.
That was protest leader Lin Fei-Fan. Since our interview, protest leaders have announced that they're planning a rally in front of the presidential office this Sunday. Protest leaders say the purpose of the rally is for the crowd supporting the movement to expand from the legislature to Ketagalan Boulevard a few blocks away. Thanks for listening to Taiwan Talk. As always, we'd love to hear what you thought of today's program. You can leave us a comment on our Facebook page or rate and review Taiwan Talk on iTunes. This helps us bring you the kind of shows you want to hear and makes it easier for other people to discover the program. For ICRT, I'm Keith Menconi.